The black lace veil covered half her face when she stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Randsburg, California. And Marshal Cole Kincaid noticed her immediately, not because of what she hid, but because of the way she carried herself with a dignity that spoke of survival rather than shame. It was June of 1897, and the desert mining town sat baking under a merciless sun that turned the air thick and wavering. Marshal Kincaid had been leaning against the post outside his office when the coach rattled to a stop, horses snorting and stamping their hooves in the powdery dirt that coated everything within 20 miles. He had seen plenty of newcomers arrive in Randsburg over the years, drawn by gold and silver promises that rarely delivered. But something about this woman made him straighten up and take notice. She wore a simple traveling dress of dark blue cotton, practical but well-made, and she carried herself with careful precision as she accepted the driver's hand to step down. The veil cascaded from her hat, black lace that obscured the right side of her face completely and cast shadows across the left. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5'7", with a slender frame that suggested she had not been eating as well as she should. Her gloved hands gripped a single worn carpet bag, and she stood for a moment in the street as if gathering her courage. Marshal Kincaid was 32 years old, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-darkened skin, and eyes the color of creek water after rain. He had worn the tin star on his chest for 4 years, long enough to know trouble when he saw it, and long enough to recognize someone running from it. But he also recognized determination, and this woman had that in abundance. He watched as she turned slowly, surveying the town with what he imagined were careful eyes behind that veil. Randsburg was not much to look at. A collection of weathered buildings clustered around the mining operations, with false-fronted stores lining the main street and houses scattered beyond in no particular order. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant mountains that shimmered purple in the heat. It was a hard place, honest in its harshness, and it either broke people or made them stronger. The woman walked directly toward the boarding house run by Mrs. Eleanor Templeton, her steps measured and purposeful. Marshal Kincaid found himself falling into step alongside her, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Afternoon, madam. Welcome to Randsburg." She turned her head slightly, acknowledging him without fully facing him. "Thank you, Marshal." Her voice was soft but clear, with an educated accent that marked her as someone from back east, probably Boston or Philadelphia. "Hot day for traveling," he said, matching her pace. "You planning to stay long?" "I am planning to stay permanently if the circumstances allow." She kept her face angled away from him, the veil fluttering slightly in the hot breeze. "I understand Mrs. Templeton runs a respectable boarding house." "She does, been here longer than most of us. Good woman." He paused, then added, "Name's Cole Kincaid, Marshal, as you noticed. If you need anything or run into any trouble, my office is right there." He gestured back toward the small building they had passed. "That is kind of you, Marshal Kincaid. I am Miss Penelope Ashford, recently of Philadelphia." They had reached the boarding house steps, and she turned to face him more directly, though still keeping the veiled side of her face in shadow. What he could see of her features showed a woman perhaps 26 or 27, with smooth skin and a delicate bone structure. Her visible eye was a striking green, intelligent and watchful. "Miss Ashford," he said, committing the name to memory. "I hope you find Randsburg to your liking. It is not Philadelphia, but it has its merits." "I am quite certain it does." There was something in her tone, a finality that suggested she had no desire to return to Philadelphia or anywhere else she had been. "Good day, Marshal." He tipped his hat again and watched as she climbed the steps and knocked on the door. "Mrs. Templeton," answered quickly, her round face breaking into a welcoming smile as she ushered the newcomer inside. Cole stood in the street for a moment longer, wondering about the story behind that veil and knowing it was none of his business. Yet, over the next 2 weeks, Marshal Kincaid found himself noticing Penelope Ashford more often than he cared to admit. She took a room at the boarding house and quickly established a routine. Each morning she would walk to the small general store run by Henry Chen, a Chinese immigrant who had given up on gold mining to sell supplies instead. She purchased fabric, thread, needles, and other sewing notions, always wearing that black veil regardless of the heat. Word spread quickly in a town the size of Randsburg. Penelope Ashford was a seamstress, and a skilled one. She offered her services for mending, alterations, and custom dressmaking at reasonable prices. Within days, she had more work than she could handle. The women of Randsburg were starved for someone who could create something beautiful in their harsh environment, and Miss Ashford proved capable of transforming plain cloth into elegant garments. Cole made a point of walking past the boarding house regularly, telling himself it was part of his rounds. He would see her sometimes, sitting on the porch in the relative cool of morning or evening, her needle flashing in the light as she worked on some project. She always wore the veil, even in the privacy of the porch, and she always kept herself slightly apart from others. The women of town gossiped, naturally. Some said she must be hideously disfigured. Others whispered about scandal, suggesting she was hiding from a husband or fleeing from shame. Cole shut down the more vicious rumors when he heard them, his tone making it clear that Miss Ashford deserved respect regardless of her reasons for privacy. It was Martha Henderson, the schoolteacher, who finally gave him more information. Cole had stopped by the schoolhouse to check on a broken window some boys had admitted to damaging with an errant baseball. Martha was organizing books, her sensible dress dusty with chalk. "I had tea with Miss Ashford yesterday," Martha said, glancing at Cole with knowing eyes. She was 45, unmarried by choice, and had a habit of seeing through people. "She is quite remarkable, you know." "Is that so?" Cole examined the window frame with more attention than it required. "She was in a fire," Martha said quietly. "She did not give me details, but I gathered it was some years ago. The scars are extensive on one side of her face. She wears the veil because people stare, and the staring is harder to bear than the scars themselves." Cole turned to look at Martha fully. "She told you this?" "Not in so many words, but I listen well." Martha set down the book she was holding. "She is lonely, Cole, terribly lonely. She came here hoping for a fresh start, somewhere she could simply exist without being defined by what happened to her." "She seems to be managing well enough," Cole said, though his chest had tightened at the thought of Penelope Ashford bearing not just physical scars but the weight of isolation. "Managing is not the same as living," Martha replied. "You should talk to her properly. Not just tip your hat and move along." "I do not know what I would say." "You are a smart man. You will think of something." But days passed, and Cole found himself uncertain how to approach Penelope without seeming intrusive. He was not a man given to fancy words or social graces. He dealt in facts and justice, in keeping order and protecting people. Romance, if that was even what he was contemplating, felt like navigating unfamiliar territory without a map. The opportunity came unexpectedly when trouble arrived in the form of 3 drifters who rode into town on a scorching July afternoon. Cole recognized the type immediately. Men who lived on the wrong side of the law, always looking for easy money and willing to take it however they could. They tied their horses outside the saloon and proceeded to drink heavily, their voices growing louder and more aggressive as the hours wore on. Cole kept an eye on them from his office, hoping they would simply drink themselves into stupidity and sleep it off. But as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, the three men stumbled out of the saloon and began harassing people on the street. It started with crude comments directed at women passing by. Cole moved quickly, intercepting them before they could corner anyone. "Gentlemen, I think you have had enough entertainment for one day. Time to settle down or move along." The largest of the three, a man with a scarred face and mean eyes, squared up to Cole. "We are not done entertaining ourselves, Marshal. This is a free country." "Free does not mean lawless," Cole replied evenly. "You can drink in the saloon peacefully or you can ride out. Those are your choices." For a moment it seemed they might choose violence instead. Cole's hand rested casually near his gun, his body relaxed but ready. He had learned long ago that showing fear invited trouble, while projecting calm confidence often prevented it. The standoff lasted perhaps 30 seconds, though it felt longer before the mean-eyed man spat in the dirt and turned away. "Come on," he growled to his companions. "This town is boring anyway." They started toward their horses, and Cole allowed himself to relax slightly. But then Penelope Ashford emerged from the general store, her arms full of packages, and the veiled profile of her face caught the attention of the three drifters. "Well now, what do we have here?" the mean-eyed man said, changing direction. "Lady wearing a veil like it is a funeral." "You in mourning, sweetheart, or just ugly?" Penelope froze, her packages clutched to her chest. Cole moved immediately, putting himself between her and the drifters. "Walk away," he said, and there was no compromise in his voice now. "Right now." "We just want to see what she is hiding under there," one of the others said, emboldened by drink. "Public street, public curiosity." "Final warning," Cole said. The mean-eyed man made the mistake of reaching past Cole toward Penelope's veil. Cole's reaction was swift and efficient. He caught the man's wrist, twisted it sharply, and had him face down in the dirt before his companions could react. The other two reached for their guns, but found themselves staring down the barrel of Cole's revolver, which had appeared in his hand with practiced speed. "You are going to mount your horses and ride out of Randsburg," Cole said, his voice deadly calm. "If I ever see any of you in this town again, I will arrest you on sight. Do we understand each other?" The two standing men nodded quickly. Cole hauled the third to his feet and shoved him toward his horse. "Get out." They left, riding hard into the desert dusk, and Cole holstered his gun before turning to Penelope. She stood exactly where she had been, packages still clutched tightly, her visible eye wide. "Are you all right, Miss Ashford?" "I am unharmed." Her voice trembled slightly despite the calm words. "Thank you, Marshal. That was not the first time men have sought to remove my veil for entertainment, but you handled it far more decisively than others have." Anger flared in Cole's chest at the thought of her being harassed repeatedly. "Anyone who bothers you in this town will answer to me. That is generous, but you cannot protect me from human curiosity." "I can protect you from human cruelty. There is a difference." He gestured to her packages. "Let me help you carry those back to the boarding house." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." They walked in silence for half the distance, the evening air still hot despite the disappearing sun. Cole carried most of the packages, leaving her with only the lightest bundle. Finally, he spoke. "I know it is not my place to say, but the veil does not matter to most folks here. People in Randsburg judge based on character and hard work, not appearance." "That is kind of you to say, Marshal, but you know it is not entirely true. People are curious. They stare. They whisper." She paused at the boarding house steps. "I wore this veil for 3 years in Philadelphia, and I still heard the whispers every day. I hoped coming west might be different, but human nature is human nature." "May I ask what happened?" Cole set the packages down carefully. "You do not have to tell me if you do not wish to." Penelope was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might refuse. Then she said, "There was a fire at the textile factory where I worked. I was 23, supervising a floor of seamstresses. One of the machines sparked and the whole building went up. I got 12 women out before part of the ceiling collapsed." She touched the veil lightly. "I was pinned under burning timber. By the time they pulled me free, half my face was destroyed. The doctors said I was lucky to survive." "You were brave," Cole said firmly. 12 women owe you their lives, perhaps, but bravery does not make people comfortable looking at the results." She picked up her bundle. "Thank you for the escort, Marshal, and for earlier." "Cole," he said. "My name is Cole. And I meant what I said about the veil not mattering, not to me anyway." She looked at him for a long moment, and he wished he could see her full expression. "Good night, Cole. Good night, Penelope." He lay awake that night in his small room behind the marshal's office, thinking about scars and courage and the cruelty of people who judged others by surfaces. He thought about Penelope Ashford facing down her fear every day, wearing that veil not because she was ashamed, but because she was tired of being treated as a spectacle. And he thought about the intelligence and strength he saw in her visible eye, the grace in her movements, the quiet dignity she maintained. The next morning, he stopped by the general store and asked Henry Chen about flowers. Henry looked at him with amused surprise. "Marshal, there are no flowers in the desert. Not this time of year anyway, too hot. Maybe some wildflowers in spring, but now, nothing." Cole frowned. "Nothing at all. I have some dried flowers Mrs. Chen uses for decoration. You could have those, but they are brittle and old." Henry studied him. "This is for Miss Ashford, yes. Maybe. She is a good customer. Always polite, always pays exactly." Henry disappeared into the back room and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "My wife makes jasmine tea. It came all the way from China with us. Give this to Miss Ashford. Tell her to brew it in the evening when the heat is less. It will help her feel at peace. How much? No charge. Consider it a gift from one newcomer to another." Henry's smile was warm. "Though we have been here 15 years, so perhaps not so new anymore." Cole took the package gratefully and made his way to the boarding house. Mrs. Templeton answered his knock, her eyebrows rising at the sight of the package in his hands. "Morning, Cole. If you are looking for Miss Ashford, she is in the parlor working." "Would it be appropriate for me to speak with her?" Mrs. Templeton's face softened. "I think that would be very appropriate indeed." She led him to the parlor, where Penelope sat in a rocking chair near the window, bent over an embroidery hoop. The light caught the thread she was working with, turning it gold against cream fabric. She looked up as he entered, setting her work aside and rising to her feet. "Marshal Kincaid. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I wanted to bring you something." He held out the package, suddenly feeling foolish. "It is tea. Henry Chen said it is from China and that it might help you relax in the evening." She took the package carefully, unwrapping it to reveal a small silk pouch of dried tea leaves. She held it to her nose and inhaled, a smile visible on the uncovered portion of her face. "This is lovely. Jasmine. I have not had proper jasmine tea in years." She looked up at him. "Thank you, this was thoughtful. I wanted to bring flowers, but apparently there are not any in the desert in July." "No, there are not." Her smile widened slightly, though the thought is appreciated even more than actual flowers might have been. Mrs. Templeton had discreetly disappeared, leaving them alone in the parlor. Cole gestured to the chairs. "May I sit for a moment?" Of course. They sat, and Cole found himself searching for words. "I have been thinking about what you said last night, about people staring and whispering. And I wanted you to know that some people see past surfaces to what matters beneath. Do they? There was a challenge in her tone, but also a hint of hope. Or do they simply say they do? I suppose that depends on the person. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I am not good with fancy words, Penelope. I am a lawman. I deal in truth and facts. So here is the truth. I think you are one of the strongest people I have met. You survived something terrible. You saved lives in the process, and then you had the courage to start over in a place where you knew no one. That takes more strength than most people have. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you work hard. I know you treat people with respect. I know you have not let what happened to you destroy who you are. He met her eye directly. And I would like to know more if you would allow it. She was quiet for a long time, her hands folded in her lap. Why? Why what? Why do you want to know more? I am a scarred woman who hides behind a veil. Surely there are other women in this territory who would be less complicated. I am not interested in less complicated, Cole said honestly. I am interested in you. You have not even seen my face. I have seen enough. But if you want to show me the rest, I am listening, or looking, or whatever it is you need from me. Penelope stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to him. Her hands trembled slightly as they rose to the edge of the veil. The scars are extensive. The right side of my face from forehead to jaw. The skin is discolored and puckered. My ear is partially missing. It is not pleasant to look at. Show me, Cole said gently, standing and moving closer. Please. I do not want your pity. You will not have it. What you will have is honesty. She turned slowly, her hands still on the veil. People have cried when they saw. Children have run away. Men have recoiled. I am not recoiling, Cole said, and I am not going anywhere. With a deep breath, Penelope lifted the veil and removed her hat, setting both aside. Then she turned to face him fully in the light from the window. The scars were indeed extensive. The entire right side of her face was a landscape of healed burned tissue, the skin mottled in shades of pink and white and red. It pulled slightly at her eye and mouth, creating an asymmetry that was striking compared to the smooth beauty of her left side. Her right ear was partially missing, the remaining portion twisted. But her eyes, both of them clearly visible now, were the same striking green, and they watched him with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Cole stepped closer and closer still, until he was standing directly in front of her. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and gently cupped her face in both hands, his calloused thumbs resting on her cheekbones on both sides. You are beautiful, he said quietly, holding her gaze. Not despite the scars, not because I can see past them. You are simply beautiful, Penelope, all of you, always. Her breath caught and tears spilled from her eyes. You do not have to say that. I do not say things I do not mean. He wiped her tears away gently with his thumbs. You saved 12 lives. You survived something that would have killed most people. You had the courage to cross a continent and start over. You create beauty with your hands every day. And yes, you are beautiful to look at as well, scars and all. I do not understand you, she whispered. You do not have to understand me, just trust me. He leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to her forehead, then to her left cheek, and then, with careful deliberation, to her scarred right cheek. You do not need to hide from me, not ever. Penelope's hands came up to grasp his wrists, holding his hands against her face as if afraid he might pull away. I have not let anyone see me without the veil since I left Philadelphia. I have not let anyone touch the scars. You can wear the veil when you want to, Cole said. When it makes you feel safe or comfortable. But around me, you do not need it. I like seeing your whole face. I like seeing you smile, even if the smile is a bit crooked because of the scarring. It is your smile, and that makes it perfect. She laughed, a sound that was half sob. You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the strangest, maybe both," he smiled. "May I call on you properly, court you as they say?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Cole, I would like that very much." He kissed her forehead again, then stepped back, giving her space to compose herself. "I should let you get back to your work, but would you have dinner with me tomorrow evening? There is a decent restaurant at the hotel. I would love to." She touched her face, as if surprised to find it bare. "Should I wear the veil to dinner?" "That is entirely your choice. I will be proud to escort you either way." She decided to wear it for the dinner, explaining that she was not quite ready for the public scrutiny, and Cole understood. Change took time, and courage was not about facing everything at once, but about facing things when you were ready. They ate roasted chicken and vegetables at a corner table in the hotel restaurant, and Cole found himself fascinated by everything about her. She told him more about Philadelphia, about her family who had been loving but overwhelmed by her injuries, unable to hide their grief at what she had lost. She spoke of the isolation that followed the fire, how she had gone from being an active member of society to someone people avoided or pitied. She described her decision to leave, to find somewhere new where she could define herself by her skills and character rather than by what had happened to her. Cole shared his own history, simpler but no less formative. He had grown up on a ranch in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His father had been a hard man but fair, teaching his sons the value of honest work and keeping your word. Cole had worn a badge since he was 25, first as a deputy in a small Texas town, then as a marshal in New Mexico, before finally settling in Randsburg 4 years ago. He liked the desert, the way it stripped things down to essentials. He liked the people who chose to live there, tough and independent. "You plan to stay in Randsburg permanently?" Penelope asked, sipping water from her glass. "I do. It is home now as much as anywhere has been." He studied her in the lamplight. "What about you? Are you staying?" "I think so. I have more work than I can manage, and Mrs. Templeton has said I can continue renting my room indefinitely. It is as good a place as any to build a life." "It could be a very good place to build a life," Cole said meaningfully. She met his eyes, understanding clear in her expression. "Yes, it could be." They courted through the rest of July and into August, spending whatever time Cole's duties and Penelope's work allowed. He would stop by the boarding house in the evenings, and they would sit on the porch in the relative cool, talking about everything and nothing. She began leaving her veil off when they were alone, and Cole made sure to touch her scarred cheek as often as her unmarred one, until she stopped flinching slightly when he did. He learned that she loved books, that she had a quick wit and a sharp mind for business, and that she hummed while she worked. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor, that he was scrupulously fair in his judgments, and that he was hopeless at anything involving needlework, despite his best attempts to help her with a simple hem repair. The town noticed, of course. People always noticed when the marshal started courting someone. But the gossip was mostly kind, with folks remarking that Cole Kincaid had finally found someone worthy of him, and that Miss Ashford seemed much happier these days. Martha Henderson gave Penelope a knowing smile whenever they passed on the street, and even Henry Chen commented that the marshal's mood had improved considerably. In early September, as the worst of the summer heat began to break, Cole took Penelope for a ride out into the desert. They traveled on horseback, Cole on his reliable bay gelding and Penelope on a gentle mare borrowed from the livery. She wore her veil for the ride, primarily to keep dust from her face, but she removed it when they stopped on a ridge overlooking the valley where Randsburg sat. "It is beautiful out here," she said, standing at the edge and looking out over the endless expanse of sand and rock and sky. Harsh but honest. Like you, Cole said, coming to stand beside her. She laughed. I am harsh. You are honest. About who you are and what you have survived. No pretense, no false sweetness, just truth. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I love that about you. She turned to look at him sharply. Love? Yes. He did not look away. I love you, Penelope. I think I started loving you the day I watched you stand up to your fear and walk into this town looking for a new life. I definitely loved you by the time you trusted me enough to remove your veil. And I love you more every day. Cole. Her voice broke slightly on his name. I love you too. I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone. I thought the fire had burned away any chance at that kind of life. But you make me feel whole. Not despite the scars, but including them, as if they are just part of my story rather than the whole story. They are part of your story, he said. An important part that shows your strength. But they are not the whole story, and they never will be. He kissed her then properly, his arms around her waist and her hands on his shoulders. The desert stretched around them, vast and indifferent, but in that moment they were the only two people in the world. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it is fast, but I am certain. I want to build a life with you here. I want to come home to you every evening and wake up beside you every morning. I want to face whatever comes next together. Yes, Penelope said, her smile radiant despite its asymmetry. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married in October of 1897, on a day when the desert air finally turned cool and comfortable. Martha Henderson stood as witness for Penelope, and Cole's deputy, a young man named James Porter, stood for him. The ceremony took place in the small church at the edge of town, with most of Randsburg in attendance. Penelope wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She did not wear her veil. There were gasps when she walked down the aisle, her face fully visible for the first time to most of the congregation. But Cole stood at the front with such obvious pride and love in his expression that any whispers died quickly. When Penelope reached him, he took both her hands and spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice that left no doubt about his feelings. I promise to honor you, protect you, and love you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to see you for who you are, completely and without reservation. I promise to build a life with you that is worthy of your courage and strength. Penelope spoke her own vows with tears streaming down both sides of her face, unmarred and scarred alike. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to trust you with my whole self, scars and fears and all. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live. When the Reverend pronounced them married, Cole kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of the assembled crowd. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, and Penelope did not reach for her veil even once. The reception was held at the hotel, with food donated by half the town and music provided by a fiddle player who worked at the mine. Cole and Penelope danced, somewhat clumsily as neither was practiced, but with such joy that it did not matter. People came to offer congratulations, and Penelope accepted them graciously, her face uncovered and her smile genuine. Mrs. Templeton pulled Cole aside at one point, her eyes damp. You are a good man, Cole Kincaid. You have given that girl back something precious that she thought she had lost forever. She gave me just as much, Cole replied, watching Penelope laugh at something Martha was saying. More, probably. You gave her the courage to stop hiding. That is no small gift. She always had the courage. She just needed someone to see it. They moved into a small house Cole had been renting, 2 rooms and a kitchen with a porch that overlooked the desert. It was not much, but Penelope transformed it with curtains she sewed and small touches that made it feel like home. She continued her seamstress work, setting up a corner of their bedroom as her workspace, and Cole continued his duties as Marshal. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cole would rise early and make coffee while Penelope dressed. Then they would share breakfast before he headed to his office, and she began her sewing. He would come home for lunch when he could, and they would spend the evenings together, talking or reading or simply sitting in companionable silence. At night, they would lie in bed, and Cole would trace the patterns of her scars with gentle fingers while she told him about her day. "Does it ever bother you?" she asked him one night, several months into their marriage. "That people stare when we are out together?" "No," Cole said honestly. "Let them stare. I know what I have and I know how lucky I am. If they cannot see your beauty and strength, that is their failure, not yours." "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." He kissed the scarred corner of her mouth. "Besides, I think fewer people stare now. You do not wear the veil anymore, and folks have gotten used to seeing you. You are just Penelope Kincaid, the best seamstress in Randsburg and the marshal's wife." "Just Penelope Kincaid," she repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." In the spring of 1898, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole on a warm evening in May, her hands nervously twisting in her lap as they sat on the porch. "I saw the doctor today," she said. "Cole, we are going to have a baby." He stared at her for a moment, the words taking time to register. Then a grin spread across his face and he pulled her into his arms. "A baby? We are having a baby." "Yes. The doctor says it should arrive in late November if all goes well." "If all goes well," Cole repeated, suddenly anxious. "Will you be all right? Is there any danger from the scars or the fire or anything?" "The doctor does not think so. The scars are on my face, not anywhere that would affect childbirth, but there are always risks." She looked up at him. "Are you happy about this?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Cole said, kissing her soundly. "I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." The pregnancy progressed normally, though the heat of summer made Penelope uncomfortable and tired. Cole fussed over her constantly, much to her amusement, insisting she rest more and work less. She compromised by taking on fewer projects and spending more time in the shade. Her belly grew, and with it, her confidence. She walked through town with her head high, her hand resting on her swelling stomach. And if anyone thought unkind thoughts about a scarred woman having a child, they kept those thoughts to themselves. Cole's protective presence helped, but more than that, Penelope had simply stopped caring what others thought. She was building a life with a man who loved her completely, and they were creating a family together. Nothing else mattered. In late November, as predicted, Penelope went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that lasted through the night and into the next day. Cole paced outside their bedroom where the doctor and Mrs. Templeton attended to Penelope, feeling helpless and frightened. He could handle outlaws and disputes and violence, but this was beyond his control, and the fear of losing her was almost overwhelming. Finally, in the early afternoon of November 23rd, he heard the sharp cry of a newborn baby. The doctor emerged moments later, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Marshal, a healthy boy, and your wife came through beautifully. She is tired but well." Cole nearly collapsed with relief. "Can I see them?" "Give Mrs. Templeton a few minutes to get them settled, then yes." Those few minutes felt like hours, but finally Mrs. Templeton opened the door and beckoned him in. Penelope lay in their bed, exhausted and pale but smiling. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blanket she had sewn herself. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Cole crossed the room and sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face visible in the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were closed in sleep. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered. "You are amazing. How do you feel?" "Exhausted. In pain. But happier than I have ever been." Penelope looked up at him. "Do you want to hold him?" Cole took his son carefully, cradling the small weight against his chest. The baby stirred slightly but did not wake. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Matthew," Penelope said. "Matthew Cole Kincaid." "If you approve." "Matthew," Cole repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect." Matthew Kincaid thrived, growing from a tiny infant into a chubby, cheerful baby who seemed to smile at everything. Penelope proved to be a devoted and capable mother, managing her baby and her sewing work with impressive efficiency. Cole discovered that fatherhood suited him, though he was constantly terrified of doing something wrong. He would come home from his rounds to find Penelope nursing Matthew or playing with him on a blanket on the floor, and his chest would tighten with the sheer improbability of his happiness. Life was not without challenges. There were sleepless nights when Matthew would not stop crying, and disagreements about small things that exhausted parents always faced. There were moments when Penelope felt overwhelmed, and moments when Cole worried about providing enough for his growing family. But they faced everything together, and the difficulties only strengthened their bond. As Matthew grew, it became clear he had inherited his mother's green eyes and his father's sturdy build. He was a curious, active child who got into everything and feared nothing. When he was old enough to notice his mother's scars, he simply accepted them as part of who she was, occasionally tracing them with his small fingers while she read to him. In the summer of 1900, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter arrived in early March of 1901, a small but vocal baby girl with Cole's brown hair and Penelope's delicate features. "Her name should be Patricia," Cole said, holding his daughter while Matthew peered curiously at his new sister from his father's knee. "Patricia Eleanor Kincaid, after your middle name." "Patricia," Penelope agreed. "Welcome to the family, little one." Matthew was initially suspicious of the baby who took up so much of his mother's attention. But he quickly became protective of his little sister, bringing her toys and trying to help with diaper changes in ways that were more hindrance than help. Cole and Penelope worked together to make sure both children felt loved and secure, and slowly their family found a new balance. The years passed with a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Cole continued as Marshal, maintaining order in Randsburg as the town grew and changed around them. Penelope's sewing business remained steady, providing extra income and keeping her skills sharp. Matthew started school, where he proved to be a bright student, and Patricia grew from a baby into a talkative little girl who followed her brother everywhere. Penelope no longer owned a veil. She had packed it away years ago, no longer needing the security it had once provided. She walked through Randsburg with her face uncovered and her head high, fully integrated into the community. She was no longer the scarred woman who hid, but simply Mrs. Kincaid, respected and liked for her skill and kindness. In the spring of 1905, when Matthew was 6 and Patricia was 4, the family took a trip to the coast. It was the first time any of them had seen the ocean, and they stood on the beach in Santa Monica, watching waves crash against the sand. Matthew ran along the water's edge, shrieking with delight when the cold water touched his feet. Patricia clung to Penelope's hand, wide-eyed and uncertain about the vast expanse of water. "Thank you," Penelope said to Cole, watching their children play. "For what?" "For all of this. For seeing past the scars to who I really was, for giving me the courage to stop hiding, for our family." She leaned against his side. "For choosing me." "You chose me right back," Cole pointed out, "and I am grateful every single day that you did. You are the strongest, most beautiful woman I know, Penelope. You always have been. Even when I wore the veil, especially then, because you wore it to protect yourself, but you had the courage to remove it when you felt safe. That takes incredible strength." She kissed him, tasting salt from the ocean spray. "I love you, Cole Kincaid. I love you too, always." Matthew ran back to them, his pants soaked and his face glowing with excitement. "Can we live here? Can we live by the ocean?" "We live in the desert," Cole reminded him. "That is our home." "But the ocean is amazing." "The desert is amazing too," Penelope said, ruffling his wet hair. "You just have to know how to look at it properly. It has its own beauty." "Like you, Mama?" Matthew asked with the innocent directness of childhood. Penelope blinked, touched. "What do you mean?" "Papa says you are beautiful even though you have scars. He says beauty is about what is inside and how someone acts, not just what they look like." "Your papa is a very smart man," Penelope said, her throat tight with emotion. "The smartest," Matthew agreed cheerfully, then ran off to collect shells. They returned to Randsburg after a week at the coast, all of them sunburned and happy. Life resumed its normal patterns, but something had shifted. Penelope realized she no longer thought of herself as a scarred woman who had found acceptance. She simply thought of herself as a woman living her life, complete and whole and exactly where she belonged. The years continued to pass. Matthew and Patricia grew, and in 1907, Penelope gave birth to another son, whom they named Michael. Cole had a moment of panic, realizing he was now outnumbered by children, but Penelope just laughed and reminded him he was fully capable of handling 3 children when he dealt with rowdy minors on a regular basis. Michael was an easier baby than his siblings had been, content to observe the world with serious eyes, while his older brother and sister provided constant entertainment. Matthew, now 8, took his role as big brother seriously, helping with the baby and making sure Patricia did not get into too much trouble. Patricia, 6 and fearless, declared that Michael was her baby and refused to let anyone else hold him without her supervision. In 1910, when Matthew was 12, Patricia was 9, and Michael was 3, Cole was offered the position of county sheriff, overseeing law enforcement for a much larger territory. It would mean more money and more prestige, but it would also mean more time away from home and more danger. He discussed it with Penelope over several evenings, weighing the pros and cons. Finally, she took his hand and said, "What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do or what would be practical, but what do you actually want?" Cole thought about it carefully. "I want to stay in Randsburg. I want to watch our children grow up. I want to come home to you every evening. The sheriff position would be impressive, but it would take me away from what matters most." "Then stay," Penelope said simply. "We have enough money, we have a good life. Choose what makes you happy." So Cole declined the sheriff position and remained as Randsburg's marshal. It turned out to be the right choice. Over the next few years, he was able to be present for all the important moments of his children's lives. He taught Matthew to shoot and ride, watched Patricia win the school spelling bee 3 years in a row, and helped Michael learn to read. Penelope's sewing business evolved as the children grew and required less constant attention. She began taking on more complex projects, creating elaborate dresses for special occasions and even wedding gowns. Her reputation spread beyond Randsburg, and women traveled from other towns to commission pieces from her. She hired 2 young women as apprentices, teaching them her skills and creating a small but thriving business. In 1915, Matthew turned 17 and announced his intention to join the army. There was trouble brewing in Europe, and he wanted to be prepared to serve if necessary. Cole understood the impulse, remembering his own youth and desire to prove himself, but Penelope was frightened at the thought of her son going to war. "He is too young," she said to Cole late one night after Matthew had gone to bed. "He is still a child." "He is nearly a man," Cole replied gently. "And we raised him to be brave and honorable. We cannot hold him back now as much as we might want to. I survived a fire, but I do not know if I can survive losing my son. We will not lose him." Cole pulled her close. "He is smart and capable, and the army will train him well. And maybe there will not even be a war. Maybe it will all blow over." But they both knew that was unlikely. In 1917, when America entered the Great War, Matthew enlisted immediately. He was 19, tall and strong and determined to do his duty. Cole and Penelope saw him off at the train station, both trying to be brave while their hearts broke. Patricia, now 16, held Michael, who was 10 and crying openly. "Come home safe," Patricia told her brother fiercely. "You have to come home safe." "I will," Matthew promised, though they all knew it was not a promise he could guarantee. He hugged each of them, lingering longest with Penelope. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, my brave boy." Penelope held his face in her hands, scarred side and smooth side alike. "You carry my heart with you. Come back to us." The months that followed were agonizing. Letters from Matthew arrived sporadically, censored and brief, telling them little about what he was actually experiencing. Penelope sewed with almost frantic energy, as if keeping her hands busy could keep her mind from imagining the worst. Cole threw himself into his work, and Patricia helped with Michael and the household while attending school. In November of 1918, word reached Randsburg that the war had ended. The town celebrated, but Cole and Penelope waited anxiously for word about Matthew. Finally, in early December, a telegram arrived. "Safe, coming home. Matthew." They wept with relief, holding each other in their kitchen while Patricia read the telegram over and over, and Michael danced around the room. Matthew arrived home in January of 1919, thinner and quieter than when he had left, but alive and uninjured physically. He carried deeper wounds, the kind that did not show on the surface, but he was home. Penelope understood something about wounds that did not show, and she made sure Matthew knew he could talk to her about anything. Slowly, over months, he began to open up about what he had seen and experienced. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding, and gradually the haunted look in his eyes began to fade. Matthew decided not to pursue a military career. Instead, he took a job at the bank in Randsburg, discovering an aptitude for numbers and finance. He courted a young woman named Sarah Williams, the daughter of the town doctor, and married her in 1921. Cole and Penelope gained a daughter-in-law and, eventually, grandchildren. Patricia followed her mother into the sewing business, showing a natural talent for design and an eye for color that surpassed even Penelope's skills. She married a mining engineer named Robert Foster in 1923, and they settled in Randsburg, where Robert managed operations at the largest mine. Michael, growing up surrounded by strong women and a father who valued justice, decided to study law. He left Randsburg at 18 to attend university in Los Angeles, but he returned regularly and never forgot his roots. He became a lawyer specializing in labor rights, fighting for miners and workers who had no other voice. Cole and Penelope grew older together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. Cole retired from his position as marshal in 1925, at the age of 60, and spent his time helping Matthew at the bank and playing with his grandchildren. Penelope continued to sew, though she let Patricia handle most of the business, content to work on special projects that interested her. They sat on their porch most evenings, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Cole would hold Penelope's hand, his thumb tracing the familiar pattern of her palm, and they would talk about their day or sit in comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about that first day you arrived in Randsburg?" Cole asked one evening in 1928. They were both 63, their lives full and their family thriving. "I think about it often," Penelope replied. "I was so frightened, so certain I would never be anything but a scarred woman hiding behind a veil. And now I know I am so much more than my scars. I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a businesswoman, a member of this community." She squeezed his hand. "I am Penelope Kincaid, and I am exactly who I was meant to be." "You have always been exactly who you were meant to be," Cole said. "I just helped you see it." "We helped each other," Penelope corrected. "That is what love is, I think, helping each other become the best versions of ourselves." They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the desert cooled around them. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built a life that was rich and full and exactly right. Penelope's scars had long ago ceased to define her, but they remained part of her story, a testament to her survival and strength. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family. Patricia had stopped by with her two children, and the grandchildren were laughing about something while Patricia helped prepare dinner. Through the window, they could see the warm glow of lamplight and the movement of people they loved. "We did well," Cole said quietly. "We did better than well," Penelope replied. "We built something beautiful." As if to prove her point, their youngest granddaughter, Patricia's daughter Emma, came running out to the porch. She was 5 years old with wild curls and an irrepressible spirit. "Grandma, Grandpa, come inside. Mama says dinner is ready and I helped make the biscuits." Penelope stood, her joints protesting slightly but her heart full. "We are coming, sweetheart." Emma grabbed her grandmother's hand, completely unbothered by the scars she had never known Penelope to be ashamed of, and tugged her toward the door. Cole followed, his hand on the small of Penelope's back, and they went inside together to share a meal with their family. The years continued to pass with the gentle inevitability of time. Cole and Penelope celebrated their 35th anniversary in 1932, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and half the town of Randsburg. It was a simple celebration with cake and music and dancing, but it was perfect in its joy. Matthew stood to make a toast, his wife Sarah beside him, and their 3 children arranged around them. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me that true love sees the whole person, not just the surface. Who showed me that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to face it. Who built a family and a life that serves as an example to all of us." To Cole and Penelope Kincaid. "To Cole and Penelope," the room echoed, glasses raised. Penelope leaned against Cole's shoulder, tears streaming down both sides of her face as they always did when she was deeply moved. "How did we get so lucky?" she whispered. "We chose each other," Cole replied. "Every day we chose each other. That is not luck. That is love." They danced that evening, slowly and carefully as befitted their age, and Cole held Penelope close and thought about the frightened woman in a veil who had stepped off a stagecoach 35 years ago. He thought about the courage it had taken her to remove that veil and the trust she had placed in him. He thought about all the years since, filled with joy and challenge and ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked, looking up at him. "That you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever known," Cole said, "and that removing your veil was the bravest thing I ever witnessed." "You gave me the courage to do it," Penelope said. "You saw me when I could not see myself." "We saw each other," Cole corrected, "and we built this." He gestured to the room full of family and friends, the life they had created together. In 1938, Cole fell ill with pneumonia. It started as a simple cold but developed into something more serious, and for several frightening weeks, Penelope sat by his bedside while doctors did what they could. The children came, gathering around their father, and Penelope held his hand and refused to leave his side. "You cannot go yet," she told him fiercely. "We still have years left. We are supposed to grow old together, remember?" "We are old," Cole pointed out, his voice weak but his smile still there. "Older then. You promised me always, Cole Kincaid, and I am holding you to that promise." Perhaps it was her determination, or perhaps it was simply his own stubborn will, but Cole pulled through. He was weaker afterward, moving more slowly and tiring more easily, but he was alive. Penelope fussed over him constantly, making sure he rested and ate properly and did not overexert himself. "You are going to drive me crazy," Cole told her one afternoon, when she insisted he stay in bed instead of going for a walk. "Good," Penelope replied. "Then we will be crazy together, as we have been for more than 40 years. They celebrated their 45th anniversary in 1942, a quieter affair than the 35th had been, but no less meaningful. The world was at war again, and Michael's son had enlisted, bringing back painful memories of Matthew's service in the First War. But the family gathered, drawing strength from each other and from the example Cole and Penelope had set. "Tell us how you met," Emma requested. She was 19 now, engaged to be married herself, and she loved hearing the story of her grandparents' romance. Cole and Penelope exchanged glances, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. Then Penelope began to speak, telling the familiar story of arriving in Randsburg wearing a veil, frightened and alone and hoping for a fresh start. She spoke of the cowboy Marshal who had seen past the veil to who she really was, who had given her the courage to remove it and show her true face. "He told me I was beautiful," Penelope said, her hand clasped in Cole's. "Not despite the scars, but just beautiful. Always. And he made me believe it was true. It was true then, and it is true now," Cole said firmly. "You are beautiful, Penelope. You always have been, and you always will be." Emma wiped tears from her eyes. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard." "It is just the truth," Cole said. "Sometimes truth is romantic." Cole and Penelope Kincaid lived to see the end of World War II in 1945. They watched their family grow to include great-grandchildren, and they remained active members of the Randsburg community, respected and loved by everyone who knew them. The story of the Marshal and the woman in the veil became part of town legend, told to newcomers as an example of what real love looked like. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1948, at the age of 83, with Penelope holding his hand. His last words to her were, "You are beautiful always," and she held those words in her heart as she said goodbye to the love of her life. Penelope lived for another 7 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to sew almost until the end, her skilled hands creating beauty even as her body grew frail. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already had the great love of her life and did not need another. She passed away in 1955 at the age of 84, in the same house she and Cole had shared for more than 50 years. Her last thoughts were of a summer evening in 1897, when a cowboy marshal had gently removed her veil and told her she was beautiful. She had believed him then, and she believed it still. The family buried Penelope next to Cole in the Randsburg cemetery, on a hill overlooking the desert they had both loved. The headstone read simply, "Cole and Penelope Kincaid, they saw each other truly." It was, everyone agreed, a perfect summary of their life together. Years later, their great-granddaughter would write their story down, preserving it for future generations. She would tell of the woman brave enough to cross a continent in search of a new life, and the man wise enough to see her strength and beauty. She would describe how love could transform fear into courage, how acceptance could heal wounds deeper than any scar, and how two people could build something extraordinary by simply choosing each other, day after day, year after year. The story of Cole and Penelope Kincaid became a legacy passed down through their family, a reminder that real love sees the whole person, that beauty has nothing to do with perfection, and that courage is not the absence of scars but the willingness to show them and be seen. It was a story about the power of acceptance, the strength of vulnerability, and the transformative nature of love that looks beyond the surface to the soul beneath. In Randsburg, where the desert wind still blows hot in summer and cool in winter, where the old buildings still stand testament to the hardy souls who built them, the story is still told. Visitors to the cemetery sometimes pause at the Kincaid headstone, touched by the simple inscription and curious about the people who rest there. Locals will share the tale, speaking of the marshal and the seamstress, of the veil and the scars, and of a love that proved that true beauty lies not in flawless skin but in courage, strength, and the ability to see and be seen completely. It is a story about the Wild West, but more than that. It is a story about what it means to be human, to survive tragedy, to find love despite fear, and to build a life that matters. It is the story of Cole Kincaid, who saw beyond a veil to the remarkable woman beneath, and Penelope Ashford, who had the courage to let herself be seen. Together, they proved that the most powerful thing one person can say to another is not a grand declaration but a simple truth. You are beautiful. Always. Their children carried forward the lessons they had learned from their parents. Matthew taught his children to value character over appearance, to judge people by their actions rather than their circumstances. Patricia passed on her mother's skills and her mother's courage, creating beautiful things and teaching others to see beauty in unexpected places. Michael fought for justice throughout his career, remembering his father's fairness and his mother's resilience. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across the country, but they all carried within them the legacy of Cole and Penelope. They carried the understanding that love is not about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone holy, scars and all. They carried the knowledge that courage means being vulnerable enough to show your true self and strong enough to accept others as they truly are. In the house that Cole and Penelope built, where Patricia lived until her own old age before passing it to her daughter, there is a small frame on the mantel. Inside is a piece of black lace, carefully preserved, the veil that Penelope wore when she first arrived in Randsburg. Beside it is a photograph from their 45th anniversary, showing an elderly couple holding hands and smiling at the camera, her scars clearly visible, and his love for her evident in every line of his face. Beneath the photograph is a card in Penelope's handwriting, written late in her life. It reads, "I wore this veil to hide my scars, thinking they made me less than I was. Cole gently removed it and showed me that I was beautiful always, scars and all. He taught me that love sees truly, and in being truly seen, we become fully ourselves. This is the greatest gift one person can give another." The story of Cole and Penelope Kincaid is not a fairy tale, though it has the shape of one. It is a true story about real people who lived in a harsh place during a difficult time, who faced their own fears and limitations, who struggled and triumphed and built something lasting. It is a story that reminds us that beauty is not diminished by suffering but often enhanced by it, that scars tell stories worth hearing, and that the truest love is the kind that sees everything and chooses to stay anyway. In the end, their story is a simple one, though it spans decades and touches generations. A woman came to a desert town hoping to hide from the world. A man saw her and refused to let her hide from him. Together, they built a life that proved love's power to transform, to heal, and to create beauty from brokenness. They lived long lives, raised good children, contributed to their community, and loved each other until death parted them. But the love did not end with death. It continued in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and all those who heard their story and were inspired by it. It continued in the understanding that real love is not about perfection, but about acceptance. Not about hiding, but about being fully known and fully loved anyway. Cole and Penelope Kincaid left behind more than descendants. They left behind a legacy of courage, a testament to the power of seeing and being seen, and a love story that reminds us all that true beauty has nothing to do with flawless skin and everything to do with authentic living. They proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remove your veil and let yourself be truly seen. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is look past someone's veil to the person they truly are. Their story ends as all stories must, with death and legacy, with memory and continuation. But it ends well, with a life fully lived, a love fully expressed, and a family that carries forward the lessons learned. It ends with the certainty that Cole Kincaid meant every word when he said Penelope was beautiful always, and that Penelope Ashford Kincaid found the courage to believe him, to remove her veil permanently, and to live the rest of her life fully seen and fully loved. In the vast expanse of the American West, in a small desert town that time has gently softened but not forgotten, their story remains. It is told to children learning about true beauty, to young couples learning about real love, and to anyone who has ever hidden behind a veil of any kind, whether literal or metaphorical. It is a story that says, "You are worthy of love exactly as you are, scars and all." It is a story that promises, somewhere there is someone who will see your true beauty and reflect it back to you until you can see it yourself. It is a story that declares, love, real love says, you are beautiful always, and means it with every fiber of its being. And in that truth, in that simple declaration of seeing and being seen, lies the entire essence of Cole and Penelope Kincaid's remarkable life together. A life that began with a veil and ended without one, that started with fear and ended with love, that proved beyond any doubt that the most powerful force in the world is the courage to be vulnerable and the grace to accept others in their vulnerability. They lived, they loved, and they left behind a story that continues to inspire all who hear it, a testament to the transformative power of love that sees truly and loves completely, always.